Welcome to the Health and Wealth Power Hour, the podcast that provides you with the knowledge and insights you need to achieve physical, mental, and financial well-being. I'm your host, Harlon Pickett, a business consultant who's passionate about helping people achieve a more balanced and healthier life. Each week, we'll deep dive into topics related to health and wealth, including retirement income planning, innovative healthcare solutions, alternative funded health plans, and specific actions individuals and business owners can take to gain control of their finances, have access to affordable quality health care, and achieve peace of mind. We'll also be joined by innovative experts who will share their knowledge and insights on prevalent topics. So, whether you're looking to grow your wealth or improve your health, you've come to the right place. Get ready to be informed, inspired, and empowered. Let's get started. Well, guess what time it is, ladies and gentlemen? It is time for another episode of the Health and Wealth Power Hour. I am your host, Harlon Pickett. Thank you so much for being with us today. Man, we got a good one. Drugs, baby. Drugs. That's right. We're going to dig into some drugs. It's going to be, I don't know. It depends on what the side effects are, right? Because that's where we're going to go today, is talking about not just drugs, but primarily the side effects and why it should matter to you. And of course, the medication's long-term effects and why it should matter to you. Obviously, a lot of the folks that listen to our podcast are in the medical world. And if you're not, you probably have got some information on some of the crazy or sometimes shady things that happen out there. We'll touch a little bit on that today as well. But we are super excited to have an incredible guest with you that unfortunately learned the hard way about side effects of a medication that she didn't even take. How could someone have side effects from a medication that they didn't even take? Well, I'll let her tell you that story, but we are super, super excited to have Suzanne Robati with us today. She asked us to call her Sue, so we will call her Sue. So Sue Robati, thank you so very much for being with us on the Health and Wealth Power Hour. Welcome aboard.
Thank you. I am so happy to be here, Harlon. It's a beautiful day and a great day to talk about drugs. Oh, well. Drugs. I know.
You know, I think one of the things that bothers me about medications in general is typically they're not prescribed to cure you. They're prescribed to mask whatever symptoms that you have. That's not always the case, but in many cases, I mean, you look at the opioid epidemic, there was nothing in an opioid that is going to cure what ails you, right? There's nothing there. It's going to certainly mask the pain, but it's not going to cure you. You look at a number of medications out there that have had long-term terrible effects. They were not cures. They were just masking different symptoms.
That's 100% true. There's a comedian who did a very funny shtick on how, this was way back in the AIDS crisis, how AIDS would never be cured because drug companies make too much money managing the symptoms. They want to keep you alive. They want to keep you with symptoms. It's true. Sadly, there was one drug we all know about, a hepatitis C drug that cures people for hepatitis C. And the company, a year after, made all this, a whole lot of investors put their money into it. And a year or two later, the investors were all upset and pulling their money out because they found out that people were getting cured, really. And the market for this drug was getting smaller because it did what it's supposed to do. Terrible.
Yeah. There's no money in cure, right? There's only money in treat.
It's true.
It's just a weird thing. You know, I've heard doctors in certain situations tell people that there's no cure for diabetes, that you're going to have that and you'll be taking stuff for forever. Yeah. But that's been proven wrong over and over.
So wrong. You're so right, Harlon. It is diabetes is some people say 100% reversible. It's reversible by many, many people if your pancreas is still making any insulin at all, because your body has a wonderful ability to recover. And so if there's any life left in that pancreas, it can learn to reproduce insulin if you can lose the weight and you can increase your exercise and eat healthier foods for you.
Yeah, absolutely. But you touched on the key point. It is absolutely not reversible if you don't change your lifestyle.
It is your job. It's your job. And if you don't want to accept that job, that is your choice. And there are medicines. Your life won't be as physically comfortable because you'll be on medicines. You have diabetes. It will be probably shorter statistically, but it's absolutely your choice. And I am not the person who's going to tell you which choice you want to make. You have to make.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I guess in some cases, the doctor is right. If you're not going to be cured, because if you're not going to change your lifestyle, if you're not going to change the habits that got you, if you're going to live the exact same life that got you diabetes to begin with, you're always going to have it.
That's true. If you keep doing the same thing's going to happen to you. And that's true in everything in life, isn't it?
Absolutely. It is. It absolutely is. All right. So I kind of went off on a tangent there. That's the way I roll. If you've listened to very many of my podcasts, you know, I meander all over the place. But I want to get back to really, how could you possibly have had side effects, severe side effect, from a medication that you never took? Tell us that story, Sue.
First, I just want to address the word side effects because I use side effects all the time. Really bad side effects, like the ones that put you in the hospital, kill you, or maim you in some way, they're really called adverse events. So there's a difference. Adverse events and side effects. I call everything a side effect because adverse events is some theoretical thing that happens. It's an event. It's out of your control. Side effects, we all know those happen to us. So that's why I call what happened to me a side effect when it was an adverse event. Okay? So when my mother was pregnant with me, she'd had a couple of miscarriages beforehand. She'd had a healthy live birth and then a couple of miscarriages. So the doctor said, okay, when you get pregnant again, come see me immediately and I will start you on this new wonder drug called diethylstilbestrol. We can call it DES. DES. And so she took this drug throughout pregnancy as she was instructed to. She went to the pharmacist every couple of weeks to get a refill. She saw her doctor regularly. And indeed, I was born at 9 pounds, 8 ounces, big, healthy baby, which is exactly what the DES advertisement said in the doctor journals. Back then, you could only advertise to doctors. And unfortunately, when I was about 13 or 14 years old, it turned out that there was a cluster of young women who had a rare cancer of the uterus and cervix called clear cell adenocarcinoma, but we'll call it CCA. It's a rare cancer. And as it turns out, the only way you can really get this rare cancer is if you were exposed to DES in utero before you're born, in utero. So my mother immediately wrote her doctor. We'd moved. She wrote the doctor and said, oh my gosh, I took this diethylstilbestrol stuff. And he said, no, you got stilbestrol. Well, that's a lie. Stilbestrol is diethylstilbestrol. And he burned his records, as did many doctors, as did Irv, the pharmacist, burned his records. It turns out that DES not only can cause that rare cancer, and 1 in 1,000 young women who were exposed to DES got that cancer. So that's a lot of people. When 5 million babies were born with that, it's a lot of people with a rare cancer. But it also caused abnormalities in your fertility organs, and it can cause down the road. It can cause rheumatoid arthritis. It can cause early onset breast cancer for those exposed to uterus. I was one of those. I'm what's called a DES daughter. And my damage was that my fertility organs are misshapen. They don't work. And so I found out at right about that time, 13, 14 years old, that I would never be able to carry a baby. That technology has changed, and maybe today, if I were, 25, you could transplant a uterus or something. But fortunately, that I wasn't offered that. I'd had enough with the medical system at that point. You've got enough experimenting on me. This was an experimental drug. The FDA had approved it, but it was bad science. So, but But what we learned, medicine learned two very important things from that, which were unknown before. When back then, it was believed up until 1971, when this news came out about CCA, the cancer, it had been believed that the mother could do anything, smoke, drink, take drugs, medicines, and the placental barrier would protect the fetus. Well, they found out that's not true. The other really interesting and important thing they learned was that the assumption in the medical community was that if a drug was going to affect you, give you a side effect, you would know it very quickly. You'd know it within a couple of days. No. A very high percentage of women, females, DES daughters, exposed in uterus, got early onset breast cancer. They were getting breast cancer at the age of 35, 38, 42, very early. And that's a very delayed side effect. And so doctors, the medical community now occasionally will look back long term, 20 years ago to see what you took and see if that's causing your adverse event, your condition now. But that was big news then. So that's, ever since then, I've been a little wary of taking medicines I don't need.
And it certainly makes sense that you would be, right? And it is interesting that thought process was so prevalent, right? That you could do whatever you wanted to.
You could. It would then, the baby was protected by the placenta. And yes.
Wow, that's pretty amazing.
There's one other thing to realize. DES was never actually taken off the market. It was just became not indicated for pregnancy. Nobody ever apologized about that little issue. But I'm sorry, this thought is escaping me. Oh, yes, it didn't work. DES did not stop miscarriages. It was a bad research. So the whole reason women were given this drug was to keep them from having miscarriages. And in the long run, they found out very quickly. They started prescribing it was approved in 1948. By 1956, the science was clear that it caused cancer in mice and it caused miscarriages in women. And yet the FDA didn't take any action. And not until 1971.
Wow.
Decades later.
Wow. And not just, it wasn't just the FDA, right? Because if this was published information, then how did doctors not know about that?
It was published in the Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology. And my mother's doctor at the time was the president of the OBGYN organization. I actually am a little angry at him to this day, to that doctor. He should have known. He was giving my mother a shot instead of a pill, which meant he was experimenting on her without her permission. And then he lied and told her he didn't give her that drug. Now, not many doctors are bad, but this guy's, I'm not happy about that.
Wow. Well, this experience obviously led you down a pathway of advocacy, not just for yourself, but for others to not be guinea pigs. as it were.
Yes.
You are the founder of an organization called medshadow.org. Yes. And because of your advocacy, you also got a pretty cool appointment to be able to review medications. So talk a little bit about that and how that came about.
Sure. Well, after I've been working on MedShadow for a while, and what MedShadow does is we're a health journalism website and we're a nonprofit. But we don't take any money from pharmaceutical companies or medical device manufacturers. We'll take donations, but not from those people. I began to look into how drugs were approved, the whole mystical FDA drug approval process. And I found out that there's a category. There are 4 types of members on an FDA advisory committee. So when the FDA is about to approve a drug or look at review a drug for approval, if the drug is at all controversial, if it's a brand new category of drugs, if it's unique in some way, they will often call together an advisory committee. And we all heard all about those during COVID because they started talking about the advisory committees met to talk about the COVID vaccinations. So all of a sudden they were front page news. So back long before COVID, I applied to be what is called a consumer rep on an FDA advisory committee. So they have 4 kinds of members. They have the scientific member, which are doctors or pharmacists or, specialists like that, maybe a researcher. And they have consumer reps, only one per committee, only one. And there's usually about 15 scientific members and 1 consumer rep. And we're the only ones who get to vote. There are other 2 members, they don't get a vote. It's a patient rep and an industry rep. So I applied to become a consumer rep, and lo and behold, they let me in. Woohoo! So I'm on I still am. I'm on year 7 of doing this. I'm on the Drug Safety and Risk Management Advisory Committee.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That is awesome. And a couple of bigger name medications that are kind of hot right now are a couple that you've actually reviewed, both Wegovy and the O-pill. Mm-hmm. So talk a little bit about what it looks like when these new medications come in and the information that is presented to you guys. Obviously, you have to make a decision based on something. There has to be a process where information is provided to you. What does that process look like?
Sure. For most drugs, the FDA requires 2 clinical trials, and this is after it's already been tested in mice, and then it's been tested in phase 1, phase 2, but a clinical trial is the last step. And that means it's on real human beings who have the issue that is being tested. If it's a diabetes drug, they have diabetes. So with Wegovy, this was its first approval that it was going for. So they were asking for approval to be used as a diabetes drug. It doesn't cure diabetes. It doesn't cure obesity or heart disease, which are other things that it's gone for approvals for. But at that point, it wasn't even talking about losing weight. That was a side effect, a beneficial side effect that people in these 2 studies, 2 clinical trials were given to us. About 1,000 people were in each of those 2 clinical trials. They were virtually all white men. And that's important because women process drugs differently than men do. They have a different weight. They have a different muscle mass. And they have different hormones. So many good reasons why. And also ethnic groups. Many ethnic groups will process drugs differently than white men. But there you go. Now, the FDA is supposed to really require testing in the primary group that has the disease. But diabetes is most common among Black people, but among non-Hispanic white women. So between those 2 groups, they weren't even in the trial. The drug was, the trial period was for about 2 years, but each person in the trial took it for only about 4 to 6 months. The weight loss in the trial was about 10% of the body weight. So that's why they said, well, it's an okay drug because the side effects are, well, there are a lot of side effects, but they had fewer cases of hypoglycemia, which is when your blood sugar drops too quickly. So it leveled out your blood sugar, and so it was better management of sugar spikes than metformin. But the side effects were significant. Something like 30% of all the people in the trial dropped out because they couldn't handle the side effects of this drug. And I remember sitting on the panel and a doctor saying, what good is a drug if people can't take it? Right. 30% dropout is too high. Now you never hear people complaining about that, but it's a fact. You know that most people really don't stay on Wegovy or Ozempic or Genovic and any of those longer than 6 months. It's just, it's hard. The nausea, the diarrhea, the vomiting, the heartburn. It's a problem. So but I did vote to approve it, opening the Pandora's box. That was its first approval. And it's an okay drug for diabetes if you can tolerate it. But this whole weight loss thing, if I can just tell you about when it came to obesity, Wegovy and Ozempic are basically the same drug. So they came back for a second approval on obesity. And they on that trial, they were able to get people to lose 15% to 20%, even 18, about 18% of their body weight, which is a lot more than the Wegovy initial diabetes trial. And part of that reason why is because in the obesity trial, you weren't just given the drug and, how are you doing? They were also given nutrition counseling, exercise support. There was a whole lot of lifestyle change that went on with that. So that drug works a lot better to lose weight if you have lifestyle change.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that makes perfect sense. You're definitely going to get better results when we tell people that now, if you're going to do that. It's just like we talked about diabetes earlier, right? If you don't change your lifestyle, you're not going to get the results that you want with anything that's helping you in that.
Yeah.
With any.
And, there's a statistic that your people should know, and that is of all new drugs approved at any given point, these are new drugs, within 4.5 years, 33% of them will have a significant new health issue added to its label. And that means that the FDA will send out letters to doctors. They may put a black box warning on the drug. They may withdraw the drug or ask the drug to be withdrawn from the market. So, for example, Wegovy now it's been about 4 years since it was approved, and we're seeing not only the possible increase of thyroid cancer, which we knew about from the start, and the dehydration we already knew about, but we're seeing thyroid cancers, intestinal obstruction. It just came on the label. They had to send out letters to doctors. It's now, and that's a significant. Not many people get it, but it's a significant problem.
Yeah.
The stomach seizure, your stomach freezes. Again, not many people, but you get 1% here, 1.5% there. It starts to add up. And there's a lot of reports of suicidal ideation, which are not proven. It's not on the label yet, but it is a matter of concern.
And very interestingly, one of the things that whenever I talk to physicians in the direct primary care world, in particular, advanced primary care, so not your just off the shelf in a network, every single one of those will tell you that if you're going to go down this GLP-1, wormhole, as it were, whether it's Ozempic or Wegovy or Zepbound or, Mounjaro, any of those, that there must be mental wellness counseling along with it.
Yeah. That's why it's...
Because part of what can happen is you're not getting the results you wanted. And some people are just at their wits' end, right? Especially if obesity isn't a true big issue. And you're just at your wits' end, right? You're finally, this is the miracle I've been waiting for. This is it. And it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
I can't even imagine the devastation that someone could go through there, which could be the result of what you were talking about. Those thoughts now, there's just no help for me. This is the end. I've finally you reached the dead end point. I'm always going to be this way. I'd rather just not be alive.
I have a good friend who was on Wegovy for a couple of years, and not a couple of years, I'm sorry, for about a year. And he didn't lose any weight at all. He stopped using Wegovy, but then and he's diabetic, but then he decided to try a gluten-free diet. And all of a sudden for him, he ended up losing 40 pounds. For him, it turned out to be a nutritional issue that was keeping him. He's now down to a much safer weight.
Yeah. A total contrast. I know a young lady who took Wegovy and has lost 80 pounds. She's just a totally different person. I know another one that has gained 10 pounds. She's been on it for almost 18 months. She hasn't lost anything. In fact, she's gained some. Both of them will tell you that they made lifestyle changes.
Mm-hmm.
One of them, I think, is a pretty good chance that she did because she lost 80 pounds. The other one, maybe not so much, right? I don't know. I will say
Yeah.
that it hasn't had a positive impact on her. And my question here is, why do you continue to take this?
Right. There is so much we don't understand about obesity. You got to be careful not to fat shame, partly because we really don't understand. And why don't we? How many millions of dollars have we spent on drugs and exercise runs when nobody's figuring out what is actually causing this thing? Let's figure it out. There's another way to look at Wegovy and Ozempic and the other ones. Let's look at it this way. Let's say you go on and you lose 20 pounds. The doctors will tell you truthfully that 40% of the weight you lose is muscle, 40% of the weight, 60% is fat. So that's 8 pounds of muscle. You lose 8 pounds. Can you imagine trying to put on 8 pounds of muscle? Just muscle? Now, let's say you're on it for 6 months, 8 months. It's generally when people give up at that point. And you put all the weight back on because they tell you from the start, you're going to put that weight back on unless you change your lifestyle. And even then, they say you're going to put that weight back on. So you put that 20 pounds back on. Well, wait a second. You now got 20 pounds of pure fat, replacing that, what was 8 pounds of fat and 12 pounds of, 8 pounds of muscle and 12 pounds of fat. Now you've got 20 pounds of fat. You're in a much worse place.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I've heard multiple doctors say is that a lot of the weight people lose on these GLP-1s is muscle weight.
Yes.
And just like, and then what you just said is the weight they put back on is not. Because if they're not working out, if they're not doing, which if they are, then they're actually going to continue to lose weight. They're probably not going to put this back on. None of these medications, and I think that's the other part people kind of miss. None of these medications are meant to be for the rest of your life.
I think Wegovy would be, or Novo Nordisk, would be perfectly happy for you to use their drugs for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
But you need to remember, that drug was studied for less than 2 years with people taking it an average of 6 months. So nobody knows what happens if you take that drug for 5 years. Nobody knows what happens if you take it for 10 years. You're on your own. And if you're a woman, you don't know as much about it.
Yeah, well, and that's right. I mean, obviously, I've never heard those stats before because that's not quite made public to us unless we talk to someone such as yourself or someone truly spends the time to look into that information. Heck, I can promise you, I don't even know where I would find that information about the study. I'm sure it's out there somewhere because I'm
it's
sure
on MedShadow.
Where's that?
Come to my website at medshadow.org.
Okay, yeah.
That's where you're going to find it. Yeah. And I will tell you, every article we put out, we link all the facts to the original study. And I wrote in there about my first person experience with Wegovy. It's not a great drug. And God bless, if people's lives are changed for the better, that's wonderful. But you need to know what the actual likelihood of that is and what the risks are. And if the risks are you're trading 8 pounds of fat for 8 pounds of muscle for 8 pounds of fat, that's not a good trade. Not a good trade at all.
So why do you feel, or what have you seen, kind of in your roles as a potential reason why doctors don't review this information as in depth as they should? I mean, I know that when you pick up a medication in a pharmacy, and this is usually our fault as the patient, these pharmacists want to talk to you about it, but you're like, nah, I got it, man. Thanks anyway. Appreciate you. Have a nice day. Get on about your business. And I don't think enough people do that. I'm certainly guilty of that myself. But in my opinion, I feel like the doctor should know some of this information before they ever prescribe the medication to you. I mentioned to you that I took lisinopril, very widely used for high blood pressure, very common medication. When my doctor prescribed it to me, he said, very little side effects. You should have no problem with this whatsoever. But I did. If you listen to some of the episodes here a while back, you might have noticed I had quite a cough during some of those. If you listen to me speaking somewhere in person, you might have noticed that I had a cough. It was directly caused by lisinopril. The primary side effect of lisinopril is a dry cough. Mm-hmm. And that is not a good side effect for someone that does a public speaking and does a podcast and stuff. It's not a good thing. It's not good for anyone because it drives you crazy, but it certainly isn't good for someone doing what I do. But I didn't know that was a side effect until I actually looked it up. What is going on? Why am I doing this? I looked it up and said, oh my gosh, it's this dadgum lisinopril. So, me being me, I decided I'd stop taking it for a couple of weeks and see if the side effect would stop. And you know what? It did. So it wasn't just my opinion that that's what it was. I proved to myself that that's what it was. And of course, then I spoke with my physician about it and got a different medication. But especially and I have a pretty good relationship with my physician, I feel, and they know what I do. I kind of felt like it was their responsibility to tell me that this might happen and it could affect my livelihood.
Yes. Doctors are, I've never met a dumb doctor. Doctors are pretty smart. Training is hard and it's extensive, and their knowledge base is wide and broad. But the FDA is approving more than 100 new drugs each year. And there's no way that everybody can keep up on that, particularly a new drug like lisinopril. When offered a new drug, you may want to say, that's only a few years old, that came out a couple of years ago. Can you give me something that's old? Give me a drug that's been out for 10 years, because then you know what the side effects are and you have a better safety profile on it. The doctor may not have been fully aware that it gives people a dry cough. He will be, because enough people will come back and complain, and that's how they'll learn. But let me take a moment here to say how great are pharmacists. They're the best. I'm a big fan, because doctors are diagnosticians. They have to learn everything about the body and this and that, blah, blah, blah. Pharmacists are drug people. They're drug junkies. Forgive me for that phrase. But they know everything about drugs. They understand drugs' interactions with other drugs. They understand how drugs interact with your food and with your vitamins and with your vitamin C and with your GNC supplements. And they're the ones that can say, this will probably give you a dry cough, so you may want to do something about that. And you'll say, wait, don't fill that prescription. Let's call my doctor. And the pharmacist will call your doctor on the spot and say, this is a podcaster, a public speaker. We don't like the dry cough. Can I switch this out for XYZ, which is less likely to give them a dry cough? And the doctor is going to say, thank you very much, generally speaking, unless there's a very specific reason why you need it. So, yes. And who knows? The lisinoprils have been out only a few years. You may find it has a terrible adverse effect. A side effect that could really harm you down the road. You also touched on
too long, so hopefully not.
Oh yeah, you didn't take that long. But I should remind people, when you've got a prescribed drug, you shouldn't take it without calling your doctor and at least saying, hey, I'm going to stop taking this for a couple weeks, okay? And the doctor will probably say, okay, but there are a lot of drugs, and you'd be surprised how many you cannot just stop cold turkey. You're taking Ambien or any sleeping medication? No, you can't stop it cold turkey. And the PPIs, things you have for gastric distress, for, all that, you can't just stop taking them. You're only supposed to take them for 2 or 3 days, but if you've taken them for 4 or 5 days, you're going to have a bad rebound effect. So just touch base with your doctor. I'm just being responsible here.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, because there are times when, especially like, say, you get this short-term medication like a antibiotic, or you have something like that. When they ask you, are you taking something else, you got to be honest.
Yes.
There are many medications you can take that will absolutely counter-effect that antibiotic or cause a whole different side effect that won't make it work, or else cause other issues. I think there's nothing as far as your medications that is not important to relay that information before you start taking another medication. I think it's very, very important advice that you just gave there, Sue.
Point. Do you know that by the time you're 65 years old, the majority of people 65 and older are taking 5 prescription medications? It's just shocking. And, think of it. A lot of us are taking medications that we don't think of as medications. I mean, A woman who's 30 years old and taking a birth control pill probably doesn't even think of it as a medicine. May not even think to mention it to her doctor, but it is a medicine.
No, absolutely. All of a sudden you wonder how you got pregnant. Because you're like, I mean, I was taking this and I've never had a problem. Well, it's because you took this and it actually counteracted that.
And that can happen.
Absolutely, it can happen.
Yes.
Absolutely, it can. I don't think it's that uncommon that things like that happen.
Right.
And then once again, there's that terrible, depending on the medication, the terrible possibility that there could be harm to the baby because of the medications that you took, whatever regimen that you may have been on, that because we know now that even from the beginning, there's things that you can be taking that can have an adverse effect on that child.
Very few medicines have been tested on pregnant women. And when they are tested on pregnant women, they look at the baby and the baby looks okay. They're saying, hey, no harm. We're good. This can be used for. And if the method of action seems to imply that it's all going to be okay, great. But that's just theory. They need to be looking at people when they're 20 years old who were exposed in utero, and then you're going to find out. Well, this is the reason I started Med Shadow when I did. I didn't start Med Shadow until I was in my 50s, so I could have been starting Med Shadow many, many years earlier. But somewhere around that time, my nephew came to live with us, and his family was having a problem. There's a whole lot going on in the family. He was not thriving. Bad things were happening. He needed another place to live. We said, why don't you come live with us? We didn't have any kids. But we like this, we like all of our nieces and nephews, and, you need help. You help your family. So he came to live with us. We put him in school, and it was a month later, we got a call from the principal who said, he's ADHD. You need to put him on Ritalin right away. And I said, how do you know? And he said, we deal with kids all day long. We're experts. We just know he's got ADHD. And I said, well, I don't know. He's new. He just got uprooted from his family. We're terrible parents. We don't know what the hell we're doing. Let's blame us. Can we give it a little time for him to settle in? And he said, okay, fine. I got another 3 weeks, and then I got the phone call. Nope, he's disturbing the class. You have to put him on Ritalin. So I took him to a doctor, a specialist. In New York, we got nothing but specialists coming out our ears. They're all specialists. This guy spent less than 20 minutes with my kid. I'll just call him my kid so that, I don't use his name. And asked him a few questions, watched him play a video game. He called me and he said, oh yeah, he's totally ADHD. Here's a prescription for 10 milligrams of Ritalin. If that doesn't work, we'll double it. If that doesn't work, we got Wellbutrin, we got Adderall. Don't worry. We'll get this kid under control. So I'm like, I didn't like that sentence. And this is the moment when I turned from general, sewer body, okey-doking through her life to health advocate. As for the first time ever, I had to advocate for somebody and protect him. So I said, well, I live in New York City, so we all know everything about Ritalin, because so many kids are on Ritalin. And we knew about the basic side effects. It makes kids jittery and anxious. They lose weight. They stop growing. But on the flip side, of course, they concentrate and do better in school, and they sit in their chair. So there's trade-offs. But I said, so forget the short-term side effects. Tell me about the long-term side effects of giving a drug that's designed to work in the brain to a 12-year-old who's in puberty. And so his hormones are going wild. And the doctor said, oh, there's no long-term effects. And I said, great, can I see the study? And he said, there's no studies, but I would just know. I've been giving it to kids for, 15 years already. This is a while ago. This is like 2006, I think. It's a while ago. And I said, well, that's not acceptable. So he charged me $400. $400, and this is in 2006. Handed me the prescription, kicked me out. So I walked over and talked to my pharmacist, and he said, no, I don't know of any studies that look at the long-term effects. The longest, and then I asked my internist doctor. She said, no, I don't know of any. So then I got on the computer, as anyone can, and I found out that there's a thing called PubMed, which is where scientific papers are accessible. The Cochrane reports, they do summaries of scientific. I looked up, the longest study I could find was how it affected kids who were on it for 342 days, I think it was. And I thought, I can't do this. I just can't. So now it's been 20 years since then. He's fine. I negotiated with the school. It was a religious school, so we made a larger donation and they managed to deal with him. But it was not a good situation. They were always kicking him out of the classroom. It was very difficult. But I just couldn't move him to another school, at that point. And then he gets to high school. It's just awful. We're dragging him through classes, but we had the ability to find a coach, an ADHD coach, who could help him, manage the symptoms, and also reminded us that ADHD is a good thing. There are a lot of beneficial aspects of ADHD. And in fact, this kid grew up and he's now a salesperson and hugely successful. You have ADHD, go into sales. It's short talks, go back and forth. It's all good. But I learned a lot about being a consumer health advocate at that point. I learned, let me think if I can give you some points here. First thing, ask for time. If you feel there's been a rush to diagnosis, or if the doctor isn't given this full thought, or if you're just not comfortable for whatever reason, ask for time. Unless you got hit by a bus, even a cancer diagnosis, you've at least got a week to adjust to the thought, to ask your friends to get a second opinion, to figure that out. I'm sorry. And then I'm getting the dry cough now. And then the next thing you do is you do your own research. And it's not easy. It's actually really boring. But, you look on a place like MedShadow, or you go onto PubMed and you use a dictionary a lot to figure out new words. And then what you do is we were in a position where we could hire a diagnostician, which is essentially a second opinion. And she found out that after a full month she took to study this kid, and found out that he is a little bit ADHD, but he was also had 2 other learning disabilities, and none of them very much, but all 3 together meant that he was just a handful to handle. So we knew what we were dealing with. So there's a lot of steps that you need to take before you just say, okay, I'm sure you're right. Here, take the medicine.
And part of the problem I think that any of us have historically is that if the doctor says I need it, I must need it.
Yes.
We unquestionably go ahead and do that because it's the doctor, right? Trust me, I'm a doctor, right? The old saying.
And they're trained. They went to how many years of medical school? Of course a doctor knows more than I am not a doctor. Let me make sure everybody knows I am not a doctor. But you can learn a lot. And it's your life.
But part of that, and I've told people this for years and years and years, you've got to be your own advocate. Both of my kids had ADHD, and we told them all through school, you have got to be your own advocate. People are going to want to do this and this, and people are going to expect this and this. You got to stand up for yourself. You've got to be your own advocate. And my daughter in particular, who had dyslexia, still has dyslexia.
My sister has dyslexia. That's tough.
So dyslexia and ADHD, well, I'll tell you, what it actually means is you are brilliant. You are extremely smart, and in some cases smarter than the teacher that's trying to tell you you don't know anything, but it's because you think differently that you don't fit into this particular place. That's one of the things about the school system, right? It's not for everybody. They teach the same thing over and over, the same way over and over, because it's going to catch the majority of people.
Yes.
But it's actually not designed to teach everyone, because how would you do that? Well, you can do that, but public school itself is not going to go down that pathway. But I digress. My point here is that medication is not always the answer. And I do know that one of the things that you advocate, and as I've seen it on MedShadow, is that there are other ways. There's alternative medicine. There's alternative things that you can do. So you don't always have to go towards those pharmaceutical drugs. There are things that you can do that can make the impact, or even a much greater impact, than taking medications.
Yes, there is. There are, in order to be healthy, there are 3 major things you need to do. You need to eat well, and I mean whole foods, not at the store, the actual food that is whole. You need to move, and you need to have friends. And I know that's the last one sounds kind of like, oh, that seems kind of lightweight, but no, they say particularly as you age, not having friends is almost as bad as smoking a cigarette, which there is really nothing worse you can do for your health than smoke a cigarette. But, and your life is just better that way. It's good to have friends. I know I personally, have a standing walking date. I have a friend that I take a walk with every Monday at 5:30. And this way I see my friend, I take a walk. It used to be a glass of wine date. Now we walk. I miss the wine, but the walk is better for me.
That's great.
I think what you're also talking about is integrative medicine, functional medicine, complementary medicine. Do not discount chiropractic. Well, I don't know much about chiropractic, gotta be honest, but acupuncture, I've used acupuncture. Physical therapy, occupational therapy. But social prescribing is a new fun thing that's happening. And there are some, I think, very advanced healthcare systems or organizations that if the doctor is, evaluation is that this person's really mostly, he's got, usual issues, but not integrating well with others, not really interacting with others enough. And they have social prescribing. And so in their office, they keep a social worker who can have a chat and say, do you like dancing? There's a dance group you can join over here. Do you like singing? There's a thing. Do you like playing darts? There's this dark, gets you involved in activities to do it. But it also is things like, we have an article on forest bathing. Forest bathing. You know what forest bathing is? Take a walk. Take a walk. But it does mean take a walk with no the earbuds in, don't be listening to anything. Just listen to the birds, listen to the leaves on the trees, feel your feet on the path, experience the walk. And it's soothing, it's good. Brings you back to mental health.
Yeah. I think that's interesting. You talk about that. I had a conversation with a group yesterday about, one of my personal beliefs is that a lot of the mental wellness issues we have in this country are because of so much stimulus. We all have to have something going on. We all have to have an earbud in, or we have to be looking at our phone, or we don't have that human interaction that you just talked about. We don't sit and talk. When we go to dinner, how many times do you look over the table by you, and everyone at that table is a family of 4, and every one of them are looking at their phone? Okay, they first sit down, they look at the menu, but as soon as the menu's gone, right, they're looking at a phone. And in many cases, sometimes they're eating and looking at their phone instead of actually having a conversation. Without that human interaction, without that support that we give to each other, I promise your phone is not giving you support. Your phone is not there. Maybe you can Google something real easily, but your phone is not giving you that confidence and that human interaction that makes such a big difference in our mental wellness.
It also gives you the dinner time conversation.
Yeah,
it gives you the ability to express your thoughts. It gives you the ability to have somebody say, I disagree. And since you're eating a meal, you're stuck discussing why you disagree and you're listening to another point of view. I think the other problem with being on your phone and being on social media, and I'm guilty of this because I live in New York City and we live in a bubble here. And, it's just this, we get the same news over and over and over again, and all reinforces the same thing. And then I'll turn on a channel from outside the bubble. You persist, you have to really look for something to break through that bubble. And you listen to it, and I'm like, it's like I live in a different country. And I do. I mean, you're in San Antonio and I'm in New York, and we probably have very different opinions on what's going on in the world. But you know what? We agree on a lot also.
Yeah.
And that's important to remember.
Yeah. No, but it is interesting how much of an influence these devices have made on our lives. And in particular, a whole generation that doesn't know how to make friends. You talked about how important it is to make friends. They don't know how to make friends because they don't even know how to interact with one another.
Yeah, it's true. And that's not to say all of them. There are some kids who probably are great at that. But I have to say it's becoming more and more common. And, these kids today, I hate people who say, these kids today.
Makes you want to shake my cane and tell them to get off my lawn. Get off my lawn.
Big kids.
But I don't have to do that because none of the kids are outside playing anymore. So there's no one on my lawn. I can't even get a kid to come and mow it anymore because no one does that, right? No one travels around the neighborhood with their lawnmower saying, hey, I'll mow your grass for $10, guy, or hell, I don't care, $25, $30. There's no one doing that anymore. There's no kids out there hustling doing that. They're all making YouTube videos and making bank off that instead, right?
I don't know. I think I'm, amazed. Maybe they're smarter than we are. I mean, if you can just sit in your room and then put on makeup and make money on it, I don't know. Maybe that's a good thing.
I guess whatever floats their boat. It is. It's a very different world. There's no doubt about it. But at the same time, I think that lack of human interaction, real, actual human interaction, has had an impact on the mental wellness of the younger generation, as we've seen that group really reach out more for help. Now, on the other side, here's the positive side of it, is they don't look at it the same way, say, people from our generation did, right? The same stigma is not on it for them that was for us. It shouldn't have been even for our group, but it was. And because of that, they don't look at it the same way at all. They want to make sure that everyone gets the support that they deserve to get and that they need to get. And so they don't look at it in the same way as past generations have. And so I do congratulate them for that, for sure.
It's true. It's true. When I was born, my mother's doctor, the brilliant guy, said, "Yo, she's got these big blue eyes. She's myopic. She's going to be short-sighted, but she's whatever." And as it turned out, they found out very quickly I was very short-sighted from birth. But they decided that they didn't want to give me glasses until I was in 3rd grade because they were afraid of the social stigma of wearing glasses. Can you imagine? To this day, I can't recognize faces, and I blame my parents. I have trouble recognizing faces.
Well, I'm also nearsighted, or was until I had cataract surgery a few years ago. But what's interesting is my parents didn't know. The doctor didn't say anything. They just thought that I was scared of stuff. Like we had a Goodyear blimp not too far from where I grew up there in Houston. And when that blimp would come over and I was, 2 or 3 years old, I would scream because all I'd have is this loud noise with these lights flashing up there. And I thought, something's getting me. But I didn't know what it was. And when they finally figured out what was wrong with me, that I was nearsighted and I got glasses, my mom just bawled because the first time I saw that blimp lit up, the joy in my face and the amazement of just that, she's like, I've been scared of this thing all my life. They didn't know why. When I finally saw it, I was like, wow, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen. So she still tells this story of how she just broke into tears because she felt like a terrible mom that, they always thought, what's wrong with this kid, scared of a blimp? Well, now you can actually see it. He loves it. And,
oh, is that good?
Now for the blimp.
I never raised a child from birth, only from 12 on. And I have to, my heart goes out to parents who have to figure things out from 0 on. Because there is nothing but change. Every single day, that little human being is a different human being. And to figure out, You hear about kids who are deaf, and parents don't figure that out until they're 2 years old. I can't blame them. I mean, I'm sure there are parents who don't pay attention to the kids, but parents generally are trying pretty damn hard.
Yeah, there's that time period when they're young, when especially there's not a book, right? If it's your first one, man, and then sometimes the second ones can be so. Our daughter was so different than our son. It's like he taught us nothing about what to expect from her. Almost nothing. I mean, maybe there's a few things, but almost nothing about what to expect from her. They were just so different as young ones and toddlers, and actually their whole life. One's 25, the son's 25, the daughter's 20. They're nothing alike still to this day. So, it's interesting. You can have the same parents and the same kind of upbringing and be so diametrically opposite of one another. It's really kind of a strange deal.
This is why you mentioned that there's no stigma or very little stigma to needing to take an ADHD medicine or an anti-anxiety medicine. But I actually do think that that there has been an intolerance that's grown in our society. Then I think you're going to agree with me. I think we are intolerant of people who are quirky and are different just because they're different. Like Einstein or Van Gogh were very quirky people. And look at what they did for the world. And I worry that we're medicating our kids into averageness.
No, I agree with you 100%. I believe that anything that's not the same as us, we kind of buck against, right? We're like, whoa, hold on a second. No, you're not doing that right. It's one of those things that I can tell you from experience with my daughter being ADHD and dyslexic. Once again, she's using both sides of her brain. So she's like way out there. She can do some stuff. And she can do things that there's zero chance that I could possibly do. And so I've told her she can't do that. In other words, she's doing homework. She's got her computer out. She's doing her homework. She's watching a video or someone playing a video game over here. She's got the TV going over here, and she's got an earbud in her ear, and she's singing. So she's singing, doing homework, watching a video on YouTube of how to play a game she's going to play later, and then the TV's going on over here too. And I'm telling her, you cannot do that. You need to focus on your work. So she immediately stops singing, tells me what's going on in the thing, tells me what's going on in the show, and tells me what she's going to do later on in this, because she's keeping up with all of these things simultaneously, and there's zero chance I could possibly do that. So I tell her she can't do it.
Yes. And let me just say one more thing, one worrisome thing to do with that. She has a huge amount of plasticity in her brain, which allows you to toggle between activities, because literally nobody can pay attention to things at once, but they can toggle really, really fast. She's clearly a master toggler.
I want to touch on one other thing before I let you go, because it was something that I saw in your profile that I've just got to know more about. So apparently you have insight on what cold and flu medications work the best, which ones actually the remedies that are out there work the best. I mean, that's vital information. Yeah, we're kind of moving into the spring and summer now, so it's not quite flu season still, but this is always valuable information. Let's be honest.
Well, there's a drug called Sudafed, and again, I'm going to say something bad about the FDA. So there's a drug called Sudafed, and it was on the drugstore shelves for years and years and years. It's an old medicine, but it was made with pseudoephedrine, yes, and that's why it's called pseudoephedrine. And if anybody's watched Breaking Bad, if you take Sudafed, you can make meth out of it. And when the government 15, 20 years ago became aware of this, what they did was say, well, you can still take this drug safely, but there are people buying 20 boxes at a time and making an illegal substance out of it, a dangerous substance. So what we're going to do is we're going to let people buy it at will, but it can't be on the counter. You have to go to the pharmacist and ask for it. And the pharmacist will only sell you maybe one box, maybe two boxes of it at a time. Well, the manufacturer is a Sudafed, and a Sudafed is very good for congestion. It has a lot of side effects, makes you very drowsy, can make your mind work very slowly. You have to be careful on it, but it's very good at decongestion. But it's got that bad problem. So the manufacturers of Sudafed said, we're going to lose a lot of business. No one's going to want to stand in line to talk to the pharmacist to get the Sudafed, to show their ID, to do whatever. So they created something called Sudafed PE, and that's a phenylephrine. So PE is a secondary drug. They took the pseudoephedrine out of Sudafed PE using this other drug. The FDA has discovered that, and that you can just buy on the shelf. So when you go to the shelf and buy Sudafed or any decongestant, like if you're taking Tylenol with decongestant, you're buying Sudafed PE. Then it's one of the combinations in there. It doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. It does not decongest. So what makes me really upset about this is it may not decongest, but it has side effects and it has risk of interacting with other drugs. But the FDA has said, we don't know if we're going to tell them to take it off the shelves. It's in a lot of drugs and it's going to be hard to do that. So you can go ahead and take it. It probably won't hurt you. That is not what the FDA is there for. If a drug is not helping you, it still has a chance of harm. What doctor would give you a drug that has no chance of helping you? You'd sue that doctor.
Yeah. So absolutely not beneficial. It's still on the shelf and you can buy it.
Yep.
The only potential thing it can do is harm you.
Yep, that's true. Now the only way that this Sudafed you can buy, so be clear, any combination drug, the Tylenol, the Motrin, all those combination cold and flu things that say they decongest, have this fake Sudafed PE in it. It's a bad drug. So it's just you just should not be using it. Now, if you do use the Sudafed, the spray that you can buy without going to the pharmacist, that's the PE, the Sudafed PE, but it's a spray nozzle, that actually does work. Yes. Okay. But be careful, because if you use it by the third day, your body becomes addicted to it. So you will feel compulsion to use it, and you will become very congested if you don't. Much more congested than you were. So really, if I can just suggest that you drink some hot tea, you spend a day in bed, that you eat the chicken soup, that you do that nasal lavage thing. Have you ever put that neti pot up your nose? Yeah, most disgusting thing ever, but it works great.
Yeah.
It works great. It's so gross. But stop. Just stop with the congestion stuff. It's not gonna do it. So.
But you can still get the other, right? You can still get the other.
You can, but it has some serious side effects. The drowsy, you can't drive a car.
Right.
If you're drunk and you can't drive a car, you might as well spend the day in bed then, right? You can't work. You really shouldn't be taking care of small children if you're taking a drug that's making you drowsy. And if you're older and you take that, drowsiness can lead to clumsiness and falls. You don't want to fall when you're 65 and over. That's very dangerous. So, be careful. Be careful out there.
And, and where we actually use quite a bit of natural stuff like essential oils and such. And there are some great options on essential oils that it'll clear you right up, man. It'll blow that stuff out of there.
You do some menthol, you do Vicks Vapor Rub. Oh my God, that stuff is good. Vicks Vapor.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I still drink peppermint water almost all the time. I put
water?
Peppermint water. It's good for digestion, but it also helps just kind of keep the sinuses clear. I mean, as you can imagine, it's got that. I've actually put a drop of spearmint in there as well, and it's just.
I should try that. I drink peppermint tea pretty frequently. I like it. It makes me feel good. But you could just put peppermint drop in the water and drink that.
Exactly. So get the essential oil peppermint and just put it in. I won't drink water the way I should otherwise. So if it's just water, then I don't. Well, there's no negative side effects for the peppermint. In fact, there's some good stuff like I'll say, like it helps with digestion and indigestion. It helps for keep that kind of stuff. And then to give it that little bit of extra kick, I also put just one drop of spearmint in there.
Just make sure that you're getting organic peppermint, not some flavoring.
No.
A bunch of chemicals.
100% organic, 100% pure, and it's also the kind. There's really not a big difference on the kind that you can. I'll just say there's a white cap and there's a darker colored cap. One of them is supposed to be approved by the FDA for you. There's absolutely zero difference between the two of them, depending on what kind you're getting. But you do have to watch out. You're right, because you can buy some that are peppermint flavored, or they're not even. It's not even mostly peppermint. In other words, it's mostly something else, and they just got a little bit of peppermint in there. What we use is 100% peppermint. So you do have to watch out for that.
Well, thank you, Harlan. You taught me something today. I'm going to go try peppermint by water. Thank you.
Yes, man. Well, I sure have appreciated all the great insights. I mean, the time has just flown, and I really apologize for keeping you as long as I did, but it's been such a great conversation. I didn't want to let you go, Sue.
I enjoyed being here, Harlan. You're a kick.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Folks, you want to learn more about those medications, you got to know the right questions to ask. You got to know how they're going to interact with other things. Start that journey at medshadow.org. That's medshadow.org. A great place to check out the information about a medication before you start taking that medication. Remember, the advice that I think is just absolutely outstanding that we got today is your doctor cannot keep up with all these medications. There's too many coming out, 100 plus a year, but your pharmacist, that's your friend. Listen to your pharmacist. Stop doing what Harlan does and not talking to the pharmacist when it's time to pick up your medication. They know about the interactions. They know what potential side effects are. Take that consultation. It can truly be the difference between life and death in some cases, or adverse effects, or just side effects. Oh, I got it right, adverse effects. Because adverse is worse than side effects, but hey, they're all side effects to us, right? Thanks again for being on the Health and Wealth Power Hour. We'll catch you next time. We are out of here.